About life, I've been amused by a number of questions that just make you go, Anybody remember Arsenio Hall? Anybody old and there you go. He had a whole spiel that he did, right? Things that make you go, Well, I have some questions this morning that make you go, The first one is this. Why is there a D in fridge but not in refrigerator? Think about that for a second, right? Why is there a D in fridge, not in refrigerator? Why is the word abbreviation so long? Some of you are going to eat lunch this afternoon and go, oh, I get it now, right? Here's the third one. Why does the word queue, like a line of people get in a queue, include all the unnecessary letters after the letter Q? Right? Why couldn't we have just done Q? And here's one of my favorites. If poison expires, does that make it more poisonous, or is it no longer poisonous? You'll think on those things for a while today. We are in a series, if you're just joining us, to asking good questions, not useless questions like those, but important ones, right? 2 weeks ago, we asked the question, is there more to life than this? It's an important question, right? Last week, in thinking about is there more to life than this, we asked the very important question of who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? And I want you to remember we're asking these questions not only because they are truly life-giving questions, but because I believe a lot of people outside of church are asking these questions as well. And I've been challenging you to connect with other people outside of the walls of this church, by asking these questions, not the fridge questions, but these questions to friends and family who may not be going to church or have stepped away from church. So today's question is this: how can I have faith? How can I have faith? In thinking about the theme this week at VBS or at Camp 3C, the idea of living it out, right? How is it that I take, if indeed the answer is there is more to life than this and there is a Jesus, then the reality is how do I live that out? How do I come by the faith to believe and to live that out? It's a pivotal question. If we actually believe there is something more to life and we actually believe in Jesus, because quite frankly, having faith is necessary to both of those questions. But in order to answer about how can I have faith, we need to first answer a very pivotal question of what is faith? And for that, and for our text this morning, I'm going to ask you to turn to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. So if you have your Bibles this morning, that's great. Turn to Hebrews chapter 11. If not, it's page 1007 in those black pew Bibles in front of you, electronic devices, however it is that you find that. Hebrews chapter 11 this morning. And the very first question as you get there is, what is faith? And for that, I want you just to look at verse 1 of Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 says this: Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. The assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Some of you, and you're in a good place if you're here going, well, what does that mean? like what are all those words put together? What is there a simpler understanding of what this is? Faith being the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. Well, there's two things that I want us to see that I think help us understand what faith is and what this actually means. And the first is this: I want you to see the certainty in that statement. There's two words in there that give us a sense of certainty. The words assurance and the word conviction, right? Assurance is that thing, that understanding that we have when we are certain of something. Conviction is when we have so much assurance of that reality that we're willing to tell anybody or anything. It's something that we believe deeply, that we are certain of. And assurance and conviction are a part of faith. The author of Hebrews is suggesting that there is a certainty that exists, a certainty that we can be certain of. But secondly, I want you to also see in that statement, there is an element of uncertainty. There's an element of uncertainty. Two words that stick out to me with regard to uncertainty are the words hope and the words things unseen. Hope, you think about hope, you think about that sense of longing for, right? Of hoping for, even though you don't know that you can be certain of it. And yet here the author of Hebrews is saying that we can be sure, we can be assured of those things that are uncertain, hoped for. And we can be sure, conviction of things that we can't even see. And I want you to see those two things melding into one another. Faith helps us as we overcome our uncertainty in certain things. The assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. If you're like me, you still need a simple illustration. And whenever I talk about faith, it's always the same illustration, but we'll build on it a bit this morning, right? What is this? It's a chair. Very good. Brilliance in the room. Do you believe, are you assured of, do you have conviction? I know I'm not thin, but do you believe that chair will hold me? All right, so I'm hearing a lot of assurance of the conviction. I also do. Like, I could probably find a manual that tells me how much this chair can hold. I probably could have experience because I've sat on the chair before, but with all of your affirmation, I believe indeed that this chair I'm assured and I have conviction, right, that that chair will hold me. But how will I know if it really holds me? If I sit in it, right? Here it is. When I was midair, I was hoping that you all were right? There's some things that I can't see. There's some things I can't see. Brett McBride may have sabotaged the chair because he knew it was going to be my illustration, and the legs were going to go out. But it didn't, right? I hope for the reality of things that I couldn't even see. I now know the chair holds me. Let me scare you a little bit by the sense of this. I might even be willing to stand on the chair, right? And how about this? I might even be able and willing to jump up and down on the chair. Some of you are really scared now, because you don't have assurance and conviction of my grace. Right? But you see, right? How do I know that the chair, because I practiced this before you all came in. I know that this chair holds me. There is a hope. There is a sense of unseenness, but there is a certainty that the chair will hold me. That's faith. That's faith. A growing assurance and conviction of what is true as we exercise proofs of what I hope for and cannot see. And some of you are going, well, that's really cool with a chair, but God can sometimes be a whole other matter, right? And I acknowledge that's true. But I also want to encourage you and that some of the principles are the same. Let me just use my own life and faith journey to help us. I was born into an amazing Christian family, right? My mother was doing devotions for me when I was in the womb, right? The reality of all that, I came out, I was in church, part of church, and loved church. Loved Jesus. And I was taught a number of really important things, among them that God is real, that God is awesome, and that indeed God loved me. And that was hammered into my head till I had no sense of any doubt of the reality of its truth. I was certain that those things were true. When I was in the 6th or 7th grade, though I had a crisis of faith, a mentor, a young man that I would say was a good friend, even though he was a good deal older than me by about 10 years, was digging a ditch with his dad on their property. His name was Randy. And one that I looked up to, one that I wanted to be like. He had tremendous faith in Jesus. He was a leader in the life of the church within the realm of which he was given responsibility for. Just a good dude. And it was one of those things of not only wanting to be Bob Stauffer when I grew up, but I wanted to be Randy Schubert when I grew up, right? And he was digging a ditch with his dad on their property, and that ditch collapsed. And at first, it didn't seem like a terrible emergency. He was talking. But as time went on, he began to lose his breath faster than they could dig him out. And by the time he was out of the ditch, he was unconscious, and by the time they got him to the hospital, he was dead. In my perfect faith world, right? My perfect faith world was shattered. That world in which I was comfortably just sitting, I was now kicking, right? Maybe even jumping up and like, can this thing really hold me? I mean, asking questions that maybe you've asked in life in crisis of faith. This isn't fair. This isn't right. God, are you really there? Are you really good? And I'm pretty sure you don't love me, or he wouldn't have died. I don't know. Maybe you've had those scenarios. Maybe you've had those questions. Maybe you too have kind of stomped on God at times rather than sit in his lap, jumped up and down, maybe anticipating that there was no way he could hold you, that he would collapse as well, and maybe hoping that he would. But he didn't. In my life, he didn't. And slowly, I realized that God was big enough and strong enough to withstand my uncertainty by remaining certain. And listen, it's in that season, in that crisis, that my faith began to grow. And then there was another crisis of faith with a different set of questions, but much the same, that was met with the certainty of God, met with the fact that God could hold me even in my uncertainty, that he was strong enough to sustain me even in my uncertainty, and my faith grew. And you would think that now, at the age of 60, I would be like a cedar redwood. All of those crises of faith, all of those demands, all of those realities of how good God is, how certain I can be, that there should be nothing in life that should ever shake me. I still walk into crises of faith. But I know this when I do, that I can stomp and I can pout and I can yell and I can scream, but I still know that I can be certain that he's enough. He's built that in me even through the crisis. So here might be a helpful summary statement of my journey, maybe yours. I have learned to be less certain of what I want by being more certain of what God intends to give me, no matter what happens. Let me say it again. I have learned to be less certain of what I want by being more certain of what God intends to give me, no matter what happens. The assurance of what I hope for is found not in my circumstances, but in the presence of God, in the strength of God. The conviction of those things unseen is a belief that God can get me through anything. Even more, show me that he is real, that he is good, and that I'm loved. Even in the craziest of moments, the craziest of seasons. And I think this is the point of the author of Hebrews here in chapters 10 and 11. It's to look at truth and look at the example. Look at truth and look at the example. So I want us to pretend that Hebrews 11:1, this sense of assurance of that which we hope for, the conviction of the things not seen, is a middle point that looks back and looks forward. It looks back at truth and it looks forward to the example. And we're going to do that really quickly this morning. I want you, if you're still open to Hebrews 11, to look back at Hebrews chapter 10, verses 19 through 25. Hebrews chapter 10, 19 through 25. Because remember, when they wrote the Bible, they didn't put chapters in, they didn't put verses in, they didn't put the reality of headings in. It's a story that's being told. And here's an important part of the story of this sense of faith. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 19. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence, listen to this, confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain, that is through his flesh. So he's saying, listen, because we have the confidence of the gospel, the reality of the coming of Jesus, the life of Jesus, the death of Jesus, and the resurrection of Jesus, because we have that confidence, and since we have such a great high priest over the house of God in Jesus, he says three things, and they all start with let us. Not the stuff that's growing in our garden now, but it's two words, let us, right? Verse 22, because we know and we can be certain of the gospel. 22, let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Because of Jesus, we can draw near with a certain heart, full assurance of faith, because of what Christ has done to cleanse us from our unrighteousness and to clothe us in his righteousness. Verse 23, secondly, let us hold fast the confession of our hope, there's that word, without wavering. For he who promised is faithful. Because of the gospel, we can know of the faithfulness of God. Therefore, we can hold fast, even though sometimes it feels uncertain, we can hold fast the confession of that gospel. And then verse 24 and 25, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Because of the gospel, we can come and sit in places like this on Sunday mornings, or sit with others on days throughout the week who love and know Jesus, who know that gospel, that even in our uncertain times will remind us of how certain God is. So let us not give up doing that. You hear it? We can be certain of these things. Look at the truth. Because of the truth of the gospel, we can have faith. We can hope. And we can believe even in the things that we do not see. And that resonates with the author of Hebrews, even all the way over to verse 39. And I love this verse. It's an inspiring verse, and sometimes we miss it because we're so focused on chapter 11. Verse 39 of chapter 10. The author goes through this. Because of the gospel, we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but we are of those who have faith and preserve their souls. Because of the certainty of the gospel, we can have faith. Because of that truth, we can have faith. The truth is that God is certain. The gospel is certain. That our assurance and our conviction needs to be more and more that God is certain, even in, maybe especially in, our uncertainty. And then comes this definition of faith. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And then he goes and has this amazing chapter, and many of you know that Hebrews chapter 11 is this hall of faith, they call it, right? It's all of these people that are mentioned that have this kind of faith, that were certain of the gospel before there was a gospel, before there was a Jesus who had come, died, and rose again. But they looked forward to the reality of that, and they knew that God would be faithful. And there's example after example after example of people who have faith. But here's the same thing about all of their lives. They had it pristine. Everything was handed to them. They never had troubles. Not true. Among those was a guy named Noah. Imagine being Noah just for a second, right? God comes to you and says, I want you to build an ark. Why would I build an ark? You see, you have to understand in Noah's day it had never rained. The skies had never opened up and water had never fallen from the sky. And God says, well, it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. And if you heard the Cosby routine, there's so much that still sticks in my, like, what's rain, right? And yet Noah, probably for 100 years, worked on this project of building a boat, not understanding how it would float. And he was the most popular kid in the block. Everybody was like, oh, Noah, you're so... No, they ridiculed him. They put him down. They kicked him out of the Elks Club. They did everything in order to come against him. Until it began to rain. And because of his faith, his family was safe. Consider Sarah. Consider Sarah, Abraham's wife. She'd been barren all her life. This reality of wanting to pass on to the next generation, to having this incredible, amazing privilege of having children has been robbed from her. It's a bit angry, a bit bitter. And now she's old, 100 years old. And God comes to her and says, Sarah, you're going to have a baby. And she said, oh, praise be to God. No, she laughed, chuckled. Her faith was not that faith that says, oh, yes, I knew it would happen. No, she laughed. How in the world is a barren 100-year-old woman going to have a baby? And yet, she did. And Hebrews 11 just keeps going on and on and on. In fact, the author of Hebrews gets to this place, and he's like, man, I could just keep going, but we're going to take up all morning on June 15th at Covenant Church. And so let me just summarize. What more shall I say, verse 32? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to fight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy. But all of them, listen, all of them had an assurance of what they hoped for and a conviction of the things that they could not see. They had faith. Now, I read this week that this chapter is the least favorite of all of those who preach the prosperity gospel. Right? Because there's some out there that'll say, hey, you become a Christian, all goes really good for you. What? So it doesn't. But in the very fact that it doesn't means we have to have faith. And here's the example. I don't know about you, but the thought of being sawn in two doesn't elicit faith in me. For the people of God, the examples that were given to us, it has. Look at the truth. God is certain. Look at the example, even in the uncertainty of persecution. There was hope. Even though they would not see, says the author of Hebrews, they would not see that promise come to them. They never got to see Jesus born, died, risen again. They had faith in God. So let's go back to the original question. I hope it's one you're asking. How can I have that faith? How can I have that faith? Well, keep reading in the text in Hebrews, past the chapter headings to Hebrews chapter 12, 1 through 4. And the author tells us, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, here it is, let us, there it is, also lay aside every weight, every sin, which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, who is what? The founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Let me tell you, young boy Rick Stauffer, when Randy Schubert died and formed my first real crisis of faith, there were people around me who I knew hurt worse than I hurt. His parents, his very close friends, his family, his brothers. And they provided a cloud of witnesses to me because I knew they hurt more than I did. And yet there was this sense of certainty. There was this sense of peace that first, I'm just going to be really honest, I was really ticked at. Aren't you going to be honest, vulnerable with your hurt? This stinks. But over time, I became very intrigued by how is it that in their crisis of faith, they seemed to have more faith. I would later discover the depths of Hebrews 11, and quite frankly, it seemed impossible to think that I would trust God in some of these circumstances. What is it that they had? Do I really want it? That cloud of witnesses would over time show me how to pursue Jesus for my faith, for certainty in the midst of uncertainty. And there's the answer. It's the answer of Hebrews 12, that we, people of God, continue to run with endurance the race that is set before you. That race that's filled with all kinds of good things, but is certainly filled with all kinds of hard things. Run that race looking to whom? Okay, it's church. The right answer is always looking to Jesus, right? Who is the founder, the originator, the creator of, the giver of, and the perfecter of faith. How can I have faith? Well, the only answer is in the one who holds it and gives it away. So are you really asking, how can I have faith? If you are, the answer is focused in Jesus. In Jesus, who is certain, even in the midst of your uncertainties. Knowing that he will do all that he has promised, and he'll hold you until the promises are full. That he will provide the forgiveness of sin, that he will provide the gift of faith, that he will provide the gift of heaven, to be assured in the things that we hope for and convicted of these things that we still do not see, to be certain in our uncertainty. As the founder and perfecter of our faith, he stands and offers us faith. That's how we get it. That's how we get it. But maybe the bigger question for you and me this morning is, in knowing that I can get it, am I truly surrendered to it? When Jesus walked the earth, he often told people that it was their faith, right, that made them well. You ever heard that? You know, he would heal someone, it's your faith that made you well. They would ask the question, why did they get better? Well, it's their faith that made them well. And me, even as a theological student, I'd always get befuddled by that. It felt like that what God was telling me is I had to get to a certain place of faith, like I had to muster all that up to get to a place, and then he would heal me. And there's some that will preach that. Don't listen. Because it's not about you. Here's a scenario. Jesus is walking the earth, and in walking the earth, the one thing that he wants to do is glorify his Father. You know how he does that? By healing people, by doing miracles, by walking on water, by calming seas, by feeding 5,000 people. He does all of that to bring glory to his Father. And so when the sick would come, he said, listen, I'm giving you the faith to believe that you are well. Are you going to surrender to it? Are you going to surrender to it? It has nothing about you. It's about everything about Jesus who holds it. But here's the deal. It doesn't always work out the way we want it to. But we're still surrendered to the reality of His will for His glory, even in this season of life, to be certain in our uncertainties. His challenge to the people that He healed wasn't to have more faith in their own power, but to surrender more to the faith that Jesus was offering. And I've found that faith in stories of our own in which He has chosen to heal, and then I've discovered that faith in plenty of stories in which He has chosen not to. But in all scenarios, when I run to Him, surrender to Him, the founder and perfecter of my faith, I see His glory. So how about this morning for you? I don't know, maybe you're here this morning and you're not sure that you even have faith in Jesus. You're not even sure that He's your Lord and Savior, that you're not even certain that you would have heaven. I give you a great invitation this morning. You've come to Covenant Church, and He stands and holds today a sense of faith. And when you trust Him, when you surrender to Him, when you sit in the chair, He says it's yours. That eternal life, that hope of salvation, the forgiveness of your sins, His love, that He's good, that He's real, and that He loves you. Maybe for a long time you've sat and looked at that, and you've even tried to study it a bit. I'm not sure that's going to hold me. I invite you this morning to have a seat. Maybe you're here this morning and your Randy story is now, and you want to stomp on it, you want to test it, you're not sure about it, you thought you were sure, now you're not so sure. Hear it. Run the race with endurance to Jesus, who holds faith even in the seasons of uncertainty, to help you to grow in the knowledge of Him, in the knowledge that He is real, that He's good, and that He loves you. It is safe to say this morning. We all need more faith. I don't care how super spiritual you are this morning. I don't care the reality of how you've come in the place of your faith this morning. Some of us indeed have experiences that have grown us more. I get that. But here's the deal. We all need more faith. And so to have a prayer that says, give me more faith, is a good prayer this morning. And the founder and perfecter of our faith stands waiting to grant it, to assure us that it is this faith that will make us well. It is this faith that will grant us certainty even in our uncertainty. So listen, don't leave today simply with a clarification that there is no D in refrigerator. I'm sorry to admit, some of you will ponder that longer than anything else I've said. I'm just clarifying, right? But maybe we leave today recognizing that God is real, He is good, and He does love you. And He holds faith today and asks you to surrender to it. That you might know an assurance of that which you hope for. That you might have a conviction of something that you cannot even see.